We are here in the beautiful Studio A in the Leslie Moonves, Julie Chen, and CBS Media Center. And I am joined by our professor, Stacy Smith, who, let's admit, had a very big night last night at the Oscars, even though she wasn't there. Frances McDormand gets up, gives a lovely acceptance speech, and at the end of it, she says to the audience, I would like to leave you with 2 words. Inclusion writer. Stacy, you coined that expression, actually created it as a solution to our inclusion issues in Hollywood in 2014 and wrote about it in the Wall Street Journal. First of all, what's an inclusion writer?
Well, it's great to be chatting with you about this, Willow, because the more attention we can bring to the solutions, right? It's not just focusing on the problem, but how do we actually move the needle? And the inclusion writer is one way to actually do that in a very straightforward and simple way. An actor, a content creator, a director can put in their contract with a producer, a studio, target inclusion goals for on-screen regarding gender, race, ethnicity, LGBT, people with disabilities, and age, and also below-the-line criteria to ensure that women and people of color are considered and good faith efforts are made to hire for cinematographers, first ADs, second ADs, production designers. This language is a step towards countering implicit bias in the interviewing or casting process.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like in practice.
Indeed.
And why it moves the needle. But were you watching?
Oh, absolutely. I thought it was so impressive what she did by having all the women stand up, and to see Rachel Morrison, the first female cinematographer to be nominated in that category. And of course, to see Meryl front row, but also Octavia Spencer, right, and Greta Gerwig, and to see how few women were standing in that room.
Absolutely. That to me was striking, sitting there.
And what a bold move to illuminate that. So I was drawn in to the ceremony at that moment. And then when she said, I'm going to leave you with 2 words, I thought for sure it would be inclusion matters or inclusion's important. But when she said the word writer, I mean, cheers and elation and just a sense of being thrilled that someone would use their platform to really open a target of opportunity for so many others. And quite frankly, that's what's happened since last night after uttering those 2 words.
So I have to admit, so sitting there, I realized, oh my goodness, that's Stacy's research. And then I realized, I wonder how many people in the room know what that is. So I have to admit, I spent a fair amount of time going, inclusion writer, that's Stacy Smith. And they would go, oh, right. So that, I think, was rippling kind of through the room and immediately caused a firestorm in the press. So tell me about what people have been calling and asking you. And
well, it's not uncommon for celebrities to make requests when they're developing and working with producers, right? Certain actors will say inclusion's really important, or we want to make sure the co-star is an underrepresented female or male in a particular story. But no one's really formalized the language, right? And so on Google, people were searching, what's an inclusion writer or writer?
It did sound like writer in the room.
Yep. And immediately the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Vanity Fair reached out, and we were able to hop on the phone and really take them through the language we've created really over the last 2 years with an attorney and also another individual in the entertainment industry.
Are people using them? Have they started to use them or not yet?
Yes, we've been ramping up, and Time's Up accelerated that process.
You should just say no until to this morning. They're using them today.
No, that would be fantastic. We have put it in the hands as a tool for many people, and it's all about timing, as you know. It's very rare to have an A-lister that works every year in the top 100 films, right? So it's a cyclical process. We know that it's been deployed. We know that it has been given and negotiated in contracts. But it's one of those things that it's just not a boilerplate that can be implemented. It has to be uniquely tailored to each.
You have to customize it to the person who's making the request and whose contract it is, the movie or television project that they're working on, and the particular diversity goals of that community.
Exactly. And so let's say somebody really is concerned with age and wants to make sure that actors either over 40, 50, or 60 are included in the storyline. Well, that would be something that the attorney would have to adopt. We also have a provision for a penalty if contractual obligations aren't met. That penalty clause might change depending on who the actor or how much risk they might want to take, because attorneys get a little concerned that, wait a second, what if someone is overlooked? And so what we're trying to do now is take the writer and get states to participate so we can attach financial incentives to productions that adopt it. So now we have the carrot and the stick. But there's really no reason why any studio, production company, or network can't meet the demands, because they're not that onerous to any company or institution.
And what about working, for example, with cities? You know, is this something you take to Mayor Garcetti and say, hey, would you like to help us actually keep film production here and support diversity goals?
Absolutely. So the film commission offices around the country, whether it's New York, California, or Georgia, in Atlanta, it's really working either locally or at the state level when they're crafting the new language around tax incentives to say, how can we get this in and move those projects to the front of the line? Because this is something that the state of California cares about, the state of New York cares about, and our country cares about. And if 40% of the country is filled with individuals from underrepresented racial ethnic groups, 20% of the country is filled with individuals with disabilities, there's no reason why those individuals aren't reflected in stories. This just helps accelerate that process and counter the bias in casting and hiring.
So in that 2014 Wall Street Journal article, you wrote about 3, I think you called them simple steps.
Simple solutions.
Simple solutions.
Yeah.
So one of them, the diversity writer. What were the other 2?
Well, one thing we've been working on, since we are a research group, it's for us, it's a lot about math, right? And the percentage of females on screen hasn't changed in about 70 years in Hollywood. Less than a third of all speaking characters are girls and women in the top 100 films, and that traces back, for decades. So we started thinking, well, what would happen to get us to parity? What would it take? Well, it turns out it's kind of humorous. If you were to simply add 5 female speaking characters each year to the top 100 films, set a new norm, and repeat that process for 4 years, we would be at equality. And so we've created this very simple solution, just add 5. Right? And really asking, because studios could easily say, put in 5 women. We know from SAG-AFTRA this is less than $5,000 per film in terms of cost. And we can counter the epidemic of invisibility that we see on screen for particularly women of color. Last year, 47 films out of 100 didn't feature a Black or African American female speaking character, 66 were devoid of Asian women, and 72 didn't feature a Latina on screen. So just add 5 is a way to start countering some of those biases, build the pipeline, and give actors those initial acting credits that can build their career. So just add 5 is a very easy one. I'm happy for next year at the Oscars if whoever wins wants to give us a shout out at 3 words instead of 2 this year. And of course, our third solution is a modified version of the Rooney Rule, right? Really, and that's what the inclusion writer gets at.
The Rooney Rule from the NFL.
From the NFL, which is from the NFL, they've stipulated that if they're going to be hiring from outside the organization, there has to be at least one underrepresented candidate brought in and interviewed for that position. And it's been met with some success, but it's not a linear solution by any means. That's really what we stipulate below the line in these key production categories. Women, people of color need to be considered, and good faith efforts need to be made to hire them.
So before we let you go, you're head of the Inclusion Initiative. Where is the Inclusion Initiative headed next? We want to come along.
I don't know. It's pretty exciting right now. I think our goal is disruption, but not disruption in terms of pointing a finger or really trying to disparage what folks are doing, but to paint a picture of the reality that particularly youth are seeing in storytelling, whether it's film, television, and digital. And I think, at the Annenberg School in general, at the Inclusion Initiative in specific, we want to be the place where we're formulating best practices that counter bias, that practitioners can take into their companies, take onto their sets to use to counter some of the things they might not be thinking about. So I just said today, it's time to come up with a new solution. So be on watch.
Okay.
It will be here
We're
soon.
looking forward to it. In the meantime, we're
Great.
just going to hang on to that beautiful moment for Inclusion Writer.
Indeed.
Professor Stacy Smith, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks.